The same services that furnish us with some of the greatest tools for life and for knowledge and for development can also enable dangerous exploitation and abuse, as we all know. In this panel discussion, we're going to hear from the Director of Cybersecurity at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Eva Galperin, the Head of External Relations at Kaspersky, Kristina Shingareva, and award-winning marketeer, MC Forbes contributor and tech evangelist, Oshin Lani, as they come together to discuss the emerging and pressing dangers of stalkerware.
Hi there, my name's Oshin Lani. I'm a journalist, an event MC and a podcast host for Fortune 500 companies. And it's a real pleasure to be here to talk about stalkerware and the dark side of tech. And I'm very honored to be joined today by two leading lights in the field of working against stalkerware and this dark side of technology. Welcome Eva Galperin, who is the Director of Cybersecurity at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. How are you, Eva?
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. And please welcome to the stage Kristina Shingareva, who is the Head of External Relations at Kaspersky. Welcome, Kristina.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, so let's just start at the very beginning. I think a lot of people might be aware of stalkerware. They might have heard about it, but it would be great to get your take on, how would you define it? And is stalkerware something that you think is well known about enough, or should people know more about it? Who wants to jump in with the definition of stalkerware?
I could do that one if you want.
Thank you. Perfect.
All right. So stalkerware is the entire class of commercial software, which is available to anyone who pays money. And it is usually advertised at people who are interested in spying on a partner or a loved one, sometimes on children, sometimes on their parents. But the whole idea behind it is that you covertly install this software on somebody else's device, and it allows you to see what is happening on that device. Often that includes location information, information about phone calls, if the device is a phone, the contents of phone calls, of text messages. Sometimes there is a keylogger that will also log all of the passwords so that you can then go on and log into that person's account yourself. All your photos, your all of your encrypted messages. It's incredibly invasive.
It absolutely sounds completely invasive, and so much of our lives are lived, in parallel in the digital world as well. So you're really getting your teeth into somebody else's life, completely there. Kristina, talk to us a bit about the facts and figures behind stalkerware. Why is this an issue that we should be addressing now? Why should people be aware of it? What's the scale of the problem?
Yes, of course. And I would like to add to what Eva said that first of all, and foremost, it's the Android problem. We also see some cases for iPhones, but they're really rare, usually on the jailbroken iPhones. And it's for the installation process. It's usually very simple. You don't have to be technically advanced person to download and install this type of software. The only difficulty is that you would need usually physical access to the victim's device in order to install this application. So another thing which is interesting about this type of software is the way that it hides itself. So basically, there might be people who watch us who might have stalkerware installed on their device, and they might have no clue about it because it has no icon on the desktop, it has no notifications about its activity, nothing, just nothing. And when talking about figures and scale of the problem, I would like also to highlight that behind all these numbers, there are real people and real stories, which in some cases might be connected to domestic violence. So our recent report shows that in 2020, last year, there were 54,000 affected users globally with Stalkerware. And it's only Kaspersky figures. You need to understand that the number should be much higher. And last year, we had this number around 67,500 of affected users. So this year, we see slight decrease in numbers. It might be due to the COVID situation, due to the lockdowns, because we see the decrease during the months of March, from March to June. After that, the numbers are normalized, let's call it so. And from March to June, we have seen the lockdowns in different countries and regions. And when it comes to the geographical distribution, we see Russia, Brazil, and the United States as the top 3 countries affected. Then we see India and Mexico. And Germany is the first European country, which is the 6th in the list.
Wow. So it's really a global issue. I mean, you mentioned, or even mentioned there, about women and children being very much affected. And, you know, your numbers there are just staggering. That's tens of thousands of people who have, you know, turned up on your radar at Kaspersky in terms of having this Stalkerware installed. But, you know, there's no icon, there's no sign that your device has the Stalkerware installed. So, you know, how do people get to know that Stalkerware has been installed on their device? Is there any kind of you know, way that people can check, for example?
Well,
yes, there are several ways. Okay, there are several ways, and I maybe will start with the easiest one is checking for the symptoms, technical signs. This can be done without any invasive program or any very super skilled technical knowledge. So basically, you see if your battery is draining fast, you see if you have increased in the mobile traffic, or you can check for the third parties application downloaded from the third parties sources, for the permissions in the applications. And you see, for example, if some of the applications, strange applications, might have access to microphone or like your location. So this might be something suspicious. This is the very first step. I don't know, maybe Eva would like to add to this as well.
Sure. One of the caveats that I'd like to give is that I talk to people who believe that they have Stalkerware installed on their devices all the time. And there's this sort of folk mythology that comes along with security, where people will tell me, well, I'm being followed by lots of bots, and therefore I must have Stalkerware installed on my machine. Or people are saying things that are related to web searches that I have made, and therefore I must have Stalkerware on my machine. Or my battery is draining very fast. These are all things that could possibly be a sign of Stalkerware, but aren't necessarily a sign of Stalkerware. So one of the things that I tell people all the time is that we approach it like a detective. You start with, are you seeing some sort of symptoms? Then you usually try to rule out the most common problem, which is not Stalkerware. It's usually the compromise of accounts. And so you go and you take a look at your accounts, and most accounts will have some sort of security page where they will show you the IP addresses and the types of devices that have been logging into your account. You want to see if something strange has been logging into your account, if something has been accessing your account that doesn't look familiar. And then if you are running an Android or a desktop machine, you can install antivirus software. Kaspersky is part of the Coalition Against Stalkerware, as is Malwarebytes and Norton LifeLock and Avast, and so they do a pretty good job of looking for this particular software. Kaspersky actually has a specific warning that they will put up if they find stalkerware on your device. Some of our other members will have a warning that essentially says there's some sort of potentially unwanted program on here, or there's some sort of malware, but they won't specifically call it stalkerware by name. And if you have an Apple device and you're concerned about malware, the AV companies can't get the permissions from Apple to do the kinds of scans that they need to do on Apple devices. So there are a couple of other things that you can do. First, Apple has an entire guide to how you might want to walk through your settings in the case of a domestic abuse situation. And also you might want to check to see whether or not your phone has been jailbroken, because all of the existing stalkerware software out there for iPhones requires a jailbreak first.
Right. That's very good to know. Some great advice there, and also some reassurance. Just because my horoscope is uncannily accurate, it does not mean there's somebody on my phone watching what I'm planning to do. That's good news. And so talk to us a bit about the legal status of stalkerware. Is it legal? I mean, it's probably a big question. Who'd like to jump into that can of worms there?
Well, I'd have to. Do you want to take this one, Kristina? Or okay, because it's such a long answer. I am not a lawyer. I don't even play one on the internet. But I can tell you that the way that lawyers all begin a question like this is with a long sigh followed by it depends.
Sure.
It depends on a lot of things. The first is, where are you? What jurisdiction are you in? What laws apply where you are? What laws apply where you are buying the stalkerware? What laws apply in the location of the person that you are spying on? So this is all a particularly thorny combination of things. And also a lot of people ask whether or not it could possibly be legal to make and sell this software. Because a lot of people look at this entire industry and they say, why is this even happening? And at least in the United States, it is legal to make this software. It is legal to write software. Software is covered by the First Amendment. It is considered to be free speech. Once you start using the software and selling the software, things get a little bit more complicated. Software which has the functionality of stalkerware, which we have described under the Coalition Against Stalkerware, is officially banned from both the Apple App Store and from the Google Play Store. But the way that companies get around this is you usually sideload it. You load it up. You will load it onto somebody's device from either another store or directly from a website, which is controlled by the person that you are buying the stalkerware from. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are a lot of elements in play. Usually, the act of covertly installing stalkerware on somebody else's computer and then pulling down information about their location and about their phone calls and about their passwords, and then going on and using this password information to log into their devices, in almost every place, that is some kind of illegal, yes.
Good to hear it. I mean, you would think so, yeah. But it's like you say, there are kind of some gray areas around here between, writing, providing, selling, and actually using, like with many things. Eva, staying with yourself for a second, I'm just curious to know, when did you first become aware of stalkerware? Was there a particular incident that, sort of opened your eyes to what was happening out there in the world?
Well, my awareness of stalkerware did not actually begin at the incident I'm about to describe. Like I knew that stalkerware existed before this, but I sort of got thrown into the deep end, beginning at a time when I was researching APTs, which are advanced persistent threats, which is the fancy way that researchers say, state actor. So when the government of China hacks somebody, when the US government hacks somebody, when the Ethiopian government hacks somebody. So I was looking into all this sort of thing, and mostly I was talking to journalists and activists. And then it turns out that the person with whom I was doing the majority of my research was outed as a serial rapist. And one day I was reading one of the interviews with one of his survivors, and what really struck me was how scared she was. And how scared everybody else who was talking about his behavior was. And the interview kept noting that everybody had their cameras covered, that they were worried that he was going to hack them. And one of the reasons for this was allegedly he threatened to do so, that he would install stalkerware on their devices. But the other was just a general fear of what he was capable of. Because he was a security professional. And honestly, to people who are not security professionals, hackers are magic. We can do anything because they don't understand sort of the limits of what we can and cannot do. And so they were really frightened. And I tweeted that if you were a woman who had, who was the victim of a sexual assault by a hacker, and you were worried about your device having some sort of spyware on it, that you could contact me and I would make sure that your device got like a forensic analysis. And this was retweeted, I think, like tens of thousands of times. And then I spent years working on this problem. I still get several messages a day about people who have seen this message. So that's how I got into this.
Yes. Wow. Well, thank you for everything you're doing. That's an amazing service and amazing work that you're doing. It's I'm sure it's so, like tens of thousands of lives have been affected by the fact that you can kind of guide them through the process, set their minds at rest a bit, and actually help them come out of the other side of that abusive situation. So thank you. So, you just spoke about how this fight against digital stalking can help victims of a sexual predator. Talk to us a bit about how it can help victims of domestic violence. I don't know who'd like to jump in there.
Kristina?
Maybe I will start. So we, first of all, we spoke before about the legal status of the stalkerware. And maybe this is the very beginning of the story. So the legal status is vague, and this is something that that is a roadblock for the antivirus industry to flag this type of software as malicious, because it's like labeling legal software as malicious. So when we started at Kaspersky working with Eva and started thinking about how to tackle this type of problem, we understood that the only way how we can do it is to better educate users, most probably, and to work with them and to raise public awareness about this topic, so that if we have our privacy alert saying that we have detected some software that is tracking your location, your text messages and photos, etc., that you would not just skip the message, but you would be really alerted about it. And then at some point, we also understood that there is a question whether it's only a technical issue or is it something about the abuse and crime. And it was some turning point for us. And we really realized that, no, it's not only technical, and yes, it's about the abuse. And this is where we realized that we need to start working with service organizations that work with victims of domestic violence. And thanks to them, we, until today, we receive enormous amounts of new insights for us. Because being a tech company, we would like to solve all the problems with technologies, but this is really not the case. We cannot do so. Just for instance, one of the cases is that when IT security solution detects malicious software, what it would like to do is immediately to block it, to remove it whatsoever. In case of stalkerware, it can pose a greater risk to a victim because there might be a notification going to to a stalker, to an abuser. He might see that you're using antivirus solution and trying to scan and trying to look for this threat. So we, of course, do not want to put a victim into a great risk. And this is something that we have learned only working with the service organizations who work directly with victims of domestic violence. So now we try to find another way of detecting, and I can talk about it a bit later. And now we work also on raising public awareness, and I think this is our greater focus now of our work, because we realized that this problem is undercover, I would say, that journalists, technical journalists, are maybe the only people who talk about it. When we talk to law enforcement agencies, they in most cases have no idea about stalkerware, unfortunately. And it means that they will not be able to treat the victims of stalkerware properly. So they need education. Also, it goes the same with the service organizations that works with victims of domestic violence. They also should be aware of stalkerware, because there might be cases when a victim gets to a shelter and then an abuser comes after the victim. So there are lots of interesting findings we do together with the NPOs, and lots of work ahead of us.
Indeed. I mean, you're speaking there about the importance of a multi-stakeholder approach to this problem, because there's so many moving parts. It's very complex. It's not just a technology issue. And we heard earlier about the coalition that you're both involved in. Talk to us a bit more about, who else is in the coalition? What are its aims? Where can people find out more?
Yes, Coalition was founded at the end of 2019. It was founded by 10 organizations, including service organizations, advocacy organizations, digital activists, and IT security companies. And now we have more than 30 organizations from all over the world. And we're welcoming and having more and more partners interested in joining. And we, among our goals, we have, as I said, raising public awareness, also working on improving the detection rate for the stalkerware. And we see that over the last year, it had been improved. We also work on some training programs for the service organizations and also for law enforcement agencies. So it's all about education. Education, technology facilitation for the NPOs, and public awareness.
There's one thing that I would like to add, which is that we also do a lot of work with academics in the field, with people who are working for universities and who are interested in doing research into stalkerware or research into domestic abuse. Because one of the things that we really lack out there are numbers and statistics and research showing us how this work is impacting people. And if we want to do outreach and we want to do awareness raising, the more information that we have about how this actually works and what kind of interventions are actually successful, the better we can do.
Absolutely. And you're speaking about the importance of research there, of awareness, of education. And this is against the context, not just of the lockdown, but of an overall move into more and more of a digital life. Our identities are increasingly online. How does this all come together to raise greater awareness of the fact that abuse can happen on these digital platforms as much as it used to happen just in the physical world?
Well, I think that trying to disentangle digital spying from say physical abuse is maybe not a particularly useful framing of this question, because what we've discovered is that these things often go together, and that furthermore, covertly spying on someone in a way that is this intrusive is in and of itself abuse. So a lot of the times when people talk about stalkerware, they talk about the ways in which stalkerware leads to abuse. And I would really like to see people reframe it as stalkerware is abuse. If you have installed stalkerware on somebody else's device, you are abusing them. The abuse has already begun. The fact that it can then be linked to physical violence is extremely worrisome, but that is absolutely not where the abuse starts. And so we should really look at trying to keep people from installing these things in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been speaking about some of the measures that, you know, the victims of stalkerware can take to see, has it been installed? Is there, you know, what needs to happen in terms of the perpetrators? I guess it sounds like there's a lot of education that still needs to happen, a lot of detoxifying situations. How does that happen?
Yes, indeed. There has to be lots of education in this area, because one of the research that has been done by the Coalition's partner, Certo Software, they did research in the UK, and they have found out that like only 31% of people think that spying on another person via their phone is illegal. Only 31. So other 69 think it's okay. And of course, there needs to be some education done, and this should be something under the slogan of stalking is not okay in your life. So it will not solve your problem. It will just increase the number of problems in your life and others' life. Yes, and we have one of the partners of the Coalition is a European organization that works with the perpetrators. They do incredible work there. They work all over the Europe, and they're very active in this field. But they're most probably the only one that I know in this field, but I'm quite new here.
Okay. That's good to hear. I mean, it sounds like we really do have a long way to go with this whole issue, and it's maybe it's the beginning, but there are great people and great companies on board, thankfully now to help the victims and to re-educate the perpetrators, and maybe to shift what people think of as acceptable. That 31% figure from the UK is truly shocking. It's really terrible.
One of the reasons why it's so common for people to think that this is legal is because there are often no legal consequences. And that's really where our outreach to law enforcement comes in. Because right now, even if you manage to find evidence that that there is stalkerware installed on your phone, what do you do with that evidence? You go to law enforcement, and then you are essentially engaging in a crapshoot. Maybe you will find somebody who actually understands the problem that you're trying to describe. Maybe you will find somebody who actually thinks this is a problem. Maybe you will find somebody who will investigate. But chances are right now that you will not. And the numbers on domestic abuse among law enforcement officers, at least in the United States, are also quite shocking. So there is a very good chance that you will end up talking to somebody who thinks that what you're experiencing is perfectly okay.
Oh my goodness, that's a whole separate area that really needs some help and education and some change very, very quickly. Open question to both of you. What do you think that private companies should be doing more to help the situation, to help fight against stalkerware? Who'd like to jump in there? Kristina.
Yes, I can talk about what we do, and I don't think that this is enough, of course, and we're working more on this. But so we started again with the privacy alert in our product. Then we improved our detection rate. Then we delivered separate tool, open source tool for detecting stalkerware without installing any software on a victim's device. It's TinyCheck. I can talk about it a bit later. And we also work on improving our notification. We see lots and lots of activity about dual use applications. So there must be some guidance for the software developers, how they develop this software with thinking of some unusual threat models in mind. So like domestic abuse threat, and finally, of course, detection.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. It's good to know. I would love to hear more about the TinyCheck a bit later. Eva, coming over to yourself. I mean, you have painted a picture that's very worrying in many places, but you know, listening to the conversation and seeing some of the coverage that's online, one might think, and one might possibly be right to assume that it's mostly an issue that happens against women by men. Would you say that's all of the picture, or are there other examples coming up of stalkerware being used to abuse people in different situations?
I hear from all kinds of people. I've been doing this work for several years, and I would say that about 2/3 of the people who come to me are women, and about 1/3 of them are men. But I see women spying on men. I see men spying on women. I see women spying on women, and I see men spying on men. You know, non-binary people spy too. People in same-sex relationships spy. This is not limited to men spying on women, but the majority of the spying is being done by men, and usually against women that they are abusing, which is extremely worrisome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a whole education piece that is badly needed in many areas, and this is absolutely one of them. There's some shocking statistics there, but there are great things happening, like the DStalk project, I believe. Who'd like to talk a bit about the DStalk project, because I think there's some great work happening there.
Yes, I think I can jump in. DStalk is the European Union project which unites organizations from different sectors, and basically organizations that work to combat domestic violence, and academia and IT security company. So Kaspersky is there, and we share our expertise in order to build extensive course on cyber violence, which will be shared with the NPOs working in this field. And this is a long-term project, so we're going to work on it for 2 years. We're going to build it, and we're going to test run it with European organizations. And hopefully it will really help organizations, not only maybe in Europe after all, to better understand the problem and to see its specifics and its features.
Excellent. And while we're on the subject of solutions to the problem, I'd love it if you could come back to the TinyCheck solution that you mentioned. I think that's very interesting. Could you go into a bit more detail about what it is, what it does, and why people should know about it?
Yes, sure. One of our researchers have been in contact with a French organization and the French NPO that works with for women's rights, and they were discussing the stalkerware issue, and it turned out that some of the victims are afraid to install anything else on their device. Mm-hmm. So in order to check for the stalkerware, they cannot use antivirus, and also because it can send notifications to an abuser. So our researcher started thinking how he can find a way around, and at some point he realized that he can build an open source tool which relies on Raspberry Pi. So it's a totally separate tool, separate from the smartphone, and it is used as a separate Wi-Fi access point. So the victim's device gets connected to this Wi-Fi point, and the TinyCheck during, let's say, 10 minutes or so, it monitors and analyzes the outgoing internet traffic in order to understand if there are some connections and communications with malicious servers, for example, with the stalkerware servers. If there is a detection. At the same time, I would like to have a disclaimer that I usually describe the detection effectiveness of different tools as a triangle. So we have the symptoms about which we spoke earlier. And these symptoms, like some technical signs, are just the signs, as you said. So it doesn't mean that you definitely have stalkerware, but it's an easy way how you can be more or less sure, let's say, that you may have something. Then there is the middle layer. This is a TinyCheck. And its killer feature is that it's absolutely inaccessible to the abuser. So abuser doesn't get notifications. Abuser should be, like, I don't know how technically skilled and know exactly what he's looking or she's looking for in order to identify some usage of TinyCheck. So it has this killer feature, but again, its indicators of compromise are updated not in the real time. So there might be some gap. And like the third level is IT security solution. Like even like we have free IT security solution for Android. So non-commercial one is also a great choice. But again, it has some risk that if this solution will detect the stalkerware, then the stalker will get notification. So there is, you need to balance and you need to understand your priorities.
Okay.
One thing.
Yes. Eva.
One thing I would like to add is that even if you are not triggering notifications, there often stalkerware has the capability to send screenshots to the person who is running the stalkerware on your device. And so then it does not matter whether or not you are running AV, there's a possibility that they will get a screenshot of you getting this information. Again, this is less likely than them getting, this is less sort of invasive than them getting a direct notification saying, hey, this person installed antivirus. And in fact, there's at least one stalkerware company that was making stalkerware that detected antivirus and actively evaded some of the more common antivirus solutions. So it's sort of an arms race with the stalkerware companies. And I'm very careful when I talk about the effectiveness of antivirus to point out that all we have are snapshots. We can only tell you sort of how effective it is, the last time we checked against the last time we checked it against stuff. And that this information is constantly changing.
Absolutely. And where can people find out more about TinyCheck, for example? Kristina.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. Where can people find out more about TinyCheck?
Yes, sure. TinyCheck is available on the GitHub.
Okay.
So it's a free open source tool, and we would like to invite IT security community to impact and to work together with us on the indicators of compromise, on the development.
That'll be the fun.
Yeah, to work together with us on further development of the tool, because it will be constantly developed, I think, because we're upgrading it all the time. And like the last upgrade was that now it detects not only stalkerware, but also different geolocation applications. So it's now maybe interesting not only for the organizations working with victims of domestic violence, but also, for example, for journalists, activists, etc., who might be under targeted personal surveillance.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that. That's really good information to have. Thank you for sharing. And Eva, coming back to your good self now, when you spoke about those stalkerware companies, upgrading their iterations, so the latest version will actually, it'll kind of screen grab and it'll send notifications to the stalker. It's hard not to feel outrage about this personally, but you have actually you're working in this stuff for years. You've been called the outrage fairy. Tell us a bit about how you got that name, and maybe what's the thing that outrages you the most right now in this field of stalkerware?
Well, that's a nickname that I got many years ago when I was still mostly working on APTs. And the sort of running joke was that my colleague Jillian York and I would write blog posts in describing the latest developments in internet censorship or in security of journalists or activists. And then it was my job to come around to the blog post and just add more outrage. I had just sort of sprinkle a little bit of outrage on the whole thing, talking about how angry I was. And that's kind of how I got that nickname. But I am never going to run out of things to be angry about. Probably the most recent story that I read that I thought was really interesting was about a company called Verkada, which sells internet connected security cameras and security solutions. And they were very, very thoroughly compromised by a hacker the other day who had access to literally all of the cameras that were sold by this company, including cameras that were inside of the Tesla offices, that were inside of prisons and hospitals. Sandy Hook High School had a network of cameras. These cameras all had facial recognition enabled. It was incredibly invasive. And now, in addition to being incredibly invasive, it was also super insecure. So I expect to see some legal action on this sometime soon.
Hell yeah, definitely. I mean, why does this happen? These are tech companies. They're supposed to hire bright people who have a mindset for security. Is it just that hackers are, in some cases, a few steps ahead? Is it a case of education? Is there a lack of the right skills in the market in terms of, security in making connected devices? What's your take on, what could happen to help fix this?
There are a couple of different things. The first is that, yes, you always assume that a tech company is running around hiring the best and the brightest. This is not true. Anyone who has ever worked for a company can tell you. Yeah. The best and the brightest are thin on the ground. The thing that drives companies is profit. And creating a sort of hack-proof device is actually not very profitable because it takes a lot of time. Furthermore, they often don't think about the domestic abuse use case at all, especially makers of cheap internet-connected devices and of sort of Internet of Things devices, which is extremely worrying because those are the things that we're putting inside of our homes. We are putting cameras and microphones inside of our homes as a matter of course. And if those are not secure, then the results can be incredibly invasive. And finally, there is sometimes an attitude towards by professional security people that domestic spying is somehow okay. I frequently have heard from people in security that that spying on their partners is fine. And part of this comes from the tradition of having the people in security be the people with ultimate access to everything in your organization. They're used to being able to see everything. And so they feel that they can be trusted with this power. Other people cannot be trusted with this power, but they can definitely be trusted with this power. And that's a norm that we really need to fix inside of our industry.
Absolutely. My goodness, it's sort of jaw-dropping. I mean, I won't start swearing on camera, but it's distressing. Thank you. Excellent. Outrage fairy on top. I love it. What do we think, if there was something that needs to happen with law enforcement agencies and regulators? They've both kind of come up during the conversation. What should their response be to the issue? Anything they should be doing but are not doing right now? Open question.
I would say that we are now facing commercial availability of stalkerware, which should somehow be treated, because now, as we spoke, the stalker is the one who will face legal consequences, not the software developer, because yes, it is so that until you're using stalkerware in, let's call it, legal way, it's okay. But if you're caught on spying, so basically if you're caught on not having the consent from the victim, then it's illegal. I would say it's a very generalized statement, but like more or less it's so. So what I think we need is like some regulation maybe there, although I'm not a legal person and I can hardly see how it's done, but definitely there need more education of the people who work in the legal sphere so they would better understand the issue. And as Eva said, that now there is this type of normalization of the tech-enabled abuse that it's thought that it brings less harm than the physical abuse, but it's not. It's just one part of the same coin, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree, absolutely. And so we're actually coming up to the end of our session, I'm afraid. That's been really fascinating. But just if you had like 1 or 2 sentences for anybody who's watching, they're in the security community, in cybersecurity, or at a corporate or a device manufacturer, what would you ask them to do, to change, to get on board with this war against stalkerware? Starting with yourself, Eva.
Well, I think that if there was one most important takeaway that I have for researchers, for people working at companies, it is to think about the domestic abuse use case when you are making your products. Think about how is this product going to be misused by someone in a messy divorce, by someone in a messy roommate situation who is moving it out under duress, by an abusive spouse or an abusive ex or an abusive parent, and to have sort of to plan accordingly. One of the things that I usually ask companies to do is when they're making a product to at least make it clear who has access to your device and make it easy to lock them out. It seems like a really, really simple ask, but you would be amazed how many products out there don't meet even this very simple standard.
Oh, wow. I'm a great believer in asking the simple questions. And yeah, I am surprised, but I wouldn't be surprised how many people are not doing this. Thank you, Eva. Thank you so much. And Kristina, the final word to yourself. If there's one thing that you want the people watching to go out and do after they've finished this fantastic conference, what would your request be?
I would like maybe to motivate to not only listen, because we spoke a lot about stalkerware, but one thing is to know that it exists. One thing is to know that domestic violence is there and tech-enabled abuse. And another thing is to believe, not only to know, but to believe, and to remember that there are real, true life stories, human stories behind everything that we spoke about.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, just on behalf of everyone watching, on behalf of myself, just want to say thank you to both of you for everything that you're doing, for sharing your insights, your experience, and your knowledge, your brilliant knowledge and advice with the delegates here at the World Ethical Data Forum. Thank you, Eva Galperin from EFF.
Thank you.
And thank you, Kristina Shingareva from Kaspersky.
My pleasure.
And thank you to my cat, who's being very vocal at the moment. My name's Oshin Lani. It's been a pleasure to be here, and stay safe and enjoy the rest of the conference.